Marcus Chun stood in the marble lobby of Sterling Heights Tower with his daughter's hospital bill folded in his jacket pocket and $23 left in his bank account when he heard the sound that would change everything. A woman's gasp, sharp and terrified, followed by the crash of a leather briefcase hitting polished floor. He turned just in time to see her collapse. Victoria Sterling, the victorious Sterling, billionaire CEO, the woman whose face was on Forbes covers and business school case studies. And she was dying right there in front of him while a crowd of people in expensive suits stood frozen like statues, pulling out phones to record instead of help. And Marcus, tired, broke, invisible Marcus who scrubbed floors in this very building after everyone went home. Marcus didn't think, didn't hesitate, he just ran. His knees hit the cold marble as he reached her, her lips already turning blue, her eyes rolling back. And someone in the crowd yelled, "Don't touch her, you'll get sued." But Marcus had been a paramedic before life crushed him, before his wife died and left him alone with a 6-year-old daughter and medical bills that swallowed his savings and forced him to take any job that would pay. So his hands knew exactly what to do. He tilted her head back, checked her airway, placed his hands on her chest, and started compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4, counting out loud while the crowd murmured, and someone said, "Should we let him do that?" And another voice whispered, "Isn't he the janitor?" But Marcus didn't hear them because all he heard was the rhythm, the count, the desperate math of keeping someone alive. And after 30 compressions, he gave her rescue breaths, watching her chest rise and fall, and then back to compressions, and his arms were burning, and his daughter's face flashed in his mind. What if no one had helped her when she needed it? And he pushed harder, faster, refusing to let this woman die. And then suddenly Victoria gasped, coughed, her eyes flying open in confusion and terror and pain. And Marcus rolled her on her side as she sucked in ragged breaths. And finally the paramedics arrived. They pushed through the crowd and took over, loading Victoria onto a stretcher, and one of them, a young guy with kind eyes, looked at Marcus and said, "You saved her life, man." But before Marcus could even process those words, a security guard grabbed his shoulder, rough and angry, saying, "You need to come with me." And Marcus said, "What? Why?" And the guard sneered, "You were supposed to be cleaning the executive bathrooms, not putting your hands on Miss Sterling. We have protocols." And just like that, Marcus was being escorted not to praise or thanks, but to the security office, where his supervisor, a thin man named Gerald with a permanent scowl, was already waiting with crossed arms and fury in his eyes. Gerald didn't ask if Victoria was okay, didn't ask what happened. He just said, "You abandoned your post. You made physical contact with an executive without authorization. You created a scene. And worst of all, you made this company liable. You're fired, effective immediately. Turn in your badge and get out." And Marcus felt the words like punches because this job, this miserable underpaid job, was the only thing keeping his daughter in treatments, keeping their tiny apartment, keeping them alive. And he said, "I saved her life. She was dying. What was I supposed to do?" And Gerald's face twisted with disgust as he said, "You were supposed to call security and stay in your lane. People like you don't touch people like her. Do you understand how much trouble you could have caused if something went wrong? She could have sued us for millions." And Marcus realized with cold horror that Gerald didn't care about Victoria's life, only about lawsuits and liability and the invisible lines that separated janitors from billionaires. And when Marcus asked, "Can I at least finish the week? I need this paycheck," Gerald actually laughed, a cruel bark of sound, and said, "You should have thought about that before playing hero. Now get out before I call the real cops." Marcus walked out of that building with empty pockets and crushing weight in his chest. And the crowd that had watched him save Victoria's life now parted around him like he was contaminated, their eyes sliding past him as if he'd never existed. And he rode the bus home in silence, staring at his hands, the same hands that had brought someone back from death, and wondered how he was going to tell his daughter that he'd lost everything because he'd done the right thing. That night, Zoe, sweet, brave 7-year-old Zoe with her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness, sat on their threadbare couch eating cereal for dinner again and asked, "Daddy, why do you look so sad?" And Marcus forced a smile that probably looked like grief and said, "Just a long day, baby." But she saw through him the way she always did, and she climbed into his lap even though she was getting too big for it and whispered, "Did I do something wrong?" And Marcus's heart shattered into a million pieces because this perfect, innocent child thought her existence was a burden, thought her medical bills were her fault. And he held her tight and said, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Don't you ever forget that." Even though he had no idea how he was going to pay for her next treatment, or their rent, or anything at all. 3 days passed like slow torture. Marcus applied to 19 jobs and heard nothing back. The electricity bill came with a shut-off warning. Zoe's doctor called to confirm next week's appointment that cost $800 he didn't have, and Marcus started looking at their few possessions and calculating what he could sell. And that's when the knock came. Sharp. Official. The kind of knock that means trouble. Marcus opened the door expecting a collections agent or an eviction notice. But instead he found a woman in an immaculate gray suit carrying a leather folder. And she said, "Marcus Chin?" And he nodded, wary. And she said, "My name is Patricia Okoye. I'm Ms. Victoria Sterling's personal attorney. May I come in?" And Marcus's mind raced. Was he being sued after all? Was Gerald right? Had saving a life somehow become a crime? But he stepped aside and let her in, and Patricia sat down on his worn couch, looked around the tiny apartment with its peeling paint and secondhand furniture, and said, "Ms. Sterling has been searching for you." Marcus's voice came out rough. "I don't have money for a lawsuit." And Patricia's face softened in surprise as she said, "Mr. Chun, you misunderstand. Miss Sterling wants to thank you. She's been trying to find you for 3 days, but the building claimed they had no employee by your name. They buried your records. She had to hire a private investigator." And Marcus felt something cold and sharp twist in his gut, because they'd erased him. Sterling Heights had literally tried to make him disappear, and Patricia continued, "Miss Sterling is aware that you were terminated for saving her life, and she's horrified. She wants to make this right, but first she wants to meet you. Would you be willing?" And Marcus thought about pride and anger and how easy it would be to say no, but then he thought about Zoe's prescription running out and the rent due in 5 days, and he said yes. The car Patricia sent the next morning was nicer than any vehicle Marcus had ever been inside. Leather seats and silent engine, and a driver in a pressed uniform. And it carried him not to some corporate tower, but to a private estate on the edge of the city, all stone walls and manicure gardens, and the kind of wealth that doesn't need to announce itself. And Marcus felt profoundly out of place in his clean but faded shirt and his only pair of good jeans. But the staff treated him with quiet respect, leading him through hallways lined with art that probably cost more than his entire life, and then into a sunlit sitting room where Victoria Sterling waited. She looked smaller than she had on that marble floor, more human, with fading bruises on her arm from the fall and exhaustion carved in her elegant features. But when she saw Marcus, her eyes filled with something raw and real, gratitude and shame and determination all mixed together. And she stood up slowly, still weak, and said, "Mr. Chun, I owe you my life." Marcus didn't know what to say, so he said nothing, and Victoria gestured for him to sit. And once they were both settled, she said, "I've been CEO of Sterling Enterprises for 12 years. I made billion-dollar decisions. I negotiated with world leaders. And in all that time, I believed I understood the world. But I didn't. I was surrounded by people who only saw me as a meal ticket or a liability. And when I needed help the most, when I was dying, every single person in that lobby either ran away or pulled out a camera, except you, who had every reason to walk past me. You dropped to your knees and saved me. And then you were punished for it, and I didn't even know." Her voice cracked on those last words. "They hid it from me. They told me an off-duty EMT happened to be there. They lied because they were afraid I'd be angry about the liability, and I've spent 3 days learning the truth about what happened to you, and I'm so deeply sorry." Marcus's throat tightened. "You didn't fire me," he managed. Victoria's face hardened. "No, but my company did, a company that bears my name, that operates under my authority, and that makes me responsible. I've already terminated Gerald and the entire management team that approved your dismissal, and I'm implementing new policies across all my holdings, but that doesn't fix what happened to you." She leaned forward, intense. "Patricia tells me you have a daughter, medical bills, you're 3 weeks from homelessness. Please, let me help. Let me make this right." And there it was, the offer Marcus had been expecting and dreading, and part of him wanted to refuse out of pride, but a bigger part, the father part, knew that pride didn't pay for Zoe's medicine. "What kind of help?" Marcus asked carefully. Victoria smiled, small but genuine. "First, practical help. I've already paid your rent for the next year. Your daughter's medical bills are cleared through her treatment completion, and there's a $50,000 deposit in your bank account, as of this morning, to cover living expenses while you figure out next steps." Marcus's vision actually blurred because $50,000 was more money than he'd seen in 5 years. It was breathing room and safety and hope, but Victoria wasn't finished. Second, a job offer. Not charity, not some fake position, but real work. "I need someone in my personal security team. someone with medical training and crisis response experience, someone I can trust. The pay is $200,000 a year plus full benefits and college fund for Zoe. And before you think it's charity, understand that after what happened, I've realized my entire security apparatus is useless. I need to rebuild it with people who actually give a damn, and you've already proven you're that person. She led him through the house to a garden where a little girl about Zoe's age was playing with a golden retriever, and Victoria called Emma, "Come here, sweetheart." And the girl ran over, and Victoria said, "Emma, this is Mr. Chun. He's the man I told you about, the one who saved Mommy's life." And Emma looked up at Marcus with huge, solemn eyes and then threw her arms around his waist in a fierce hug. And Victoria's voice went soft as she said, "After her father died 2 years ago, Emma's had nightmares about losing me too, but knowing someone like you exists in the world, someone who helps even when it's hard, that's helped her sleep again." Marcus knelt down to Emma's level and said, "Your mom's really strong. She's going to be okay." And Emma nodded seriously and whispered, "Thank you for saving her." And Marcus had to blink back tears because this child understood gratitude in a way that an entire lobby of adults hadn't. The story should have ended there, perfect and wrapped up, but life isn't neat. And 3 months later, Marcus learned exactly why Victoria had needed someone she could trust. He was working late in her executive office, going over security protocols, when a man in an expensive suit walked in without knocking. Richard Sterling, Victoria's cousin and board member, and his face went ugly when he saw Marcus sitting at the conference table reviewing documents. And he snarled, "What is the janitor doing with confidential files?" And Marcus said calmly, "I'm head of personal security, Mr. Sterling, and these protocols were assigned to me by Victoria," but Richard's sneer only deepened as he said, "So she's really going through with this diversity hire nonsense, putting the help in positions of power to make herself look good. Tell me, how much is she paying you to be her train pet?" And the words were designed to cut, to reduce Marcus back to nothing. But before Marcus could respond, Victoria's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Richard, my office now." Marcus wasn't privy to that conversation, but he heard the raised voices, heard Victoria say words like respect and human decency. And if you can't accept that merit matters more than pedigree, then you don't belong in this company. And an hour later, Richard stormed out red-faced and furious. And Victoria emerged looking tired but resolved, and she told Marcus, "I've been cleaning house. Not just management, but board members, investors, anyone who thinks people are disposable. And it's cost me relationships and deals, and I don't care because I almost died, and the only person who cared enough to help was the one everyone else dismissed. And that taught me everything I needed to know about the world I'd built. So I'm building a different one now, and I'm glad you're part of it." And Marcus realized this was bigger than him, bigger than one firing or one rescue. This was about Victoria using her second chance at life to demand better from everyone around her, and he was honored to stand beside her in that fight. A year later, Marcus stood in that same marble lobby, not as a janitor this time, but as Victoria's head of security, wearing a sharp suit and an earpiece, watching her give a speech to the entire company about dignity and value, and seeing every human being as worthy of respect. And when she finished and the applause filled the space, she caught his eye across the crowd and smiled. And Marcus thought about how strange and unpredictable life was, how $23 and one moment of courage had led to this. A career he loved, a daughter who was healthy and thriving in private school on full scholarship, a purpose that meant something. And when someone in the crowd whispered, "Isn't that the guy who saved her life?" another voice answered, "That's Marcus Chun. He's a legend." And for the first time in years, Marcus felt like himself again, not invisible, not less than, just a man who'd done the right thing and been rewarded not with punishment, but with a second chance at living. And that, Marcus thought as he watched Victoria laugh with Emma in the front row, that was justice, real, messy, hard won, and absolutely worth fighting for.